I would like to say a very warm welcome to all of you that are joining from around Australia to this exciting morning of discussion and engagement, our National Forum on Community Resilience. My name is Briony Rogers. I am the CEO of Fire to Flourish at Monash Sustainable Development Institute, and I'm delighted to be one of the hosts here this morning, along with Liz Mackinlay from Australian Business Volunteers and Bhiamie Williamson, who's leading our National Indigenous Disaster Resilience Program. I will start by acknowledging the Bunurong people, which is where I am based, here on the Kulin Nations in Naarm in Melbourne. The Bunurong people are the traditional custodians of the land around me, and I pay respects to elders past and present. And I extend that respect to the traditional custodians of the lands that you're all each joining from. And feel free to say hello and introduce yourself in the chat box. And if you'd like to acknowledge the country where you're joining from, that would be very welcome. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait people who are joining us this morning online. And I'd particularly like to acknowledge and thank First Nations people across Australia for their stewardship, for their care of country over millennia. And I deeply acknowledge the incredible work that First Nations people do to support community day in and day out, especially when disaster strikes. The stories of disaster, resilience and strength and leadership in First Nations communities are humbling and offer much wisdom and insight as we collectively come to terms with these new realities that we face with climate change. Each of us here this morning have been part of recent discussions, recent months, recent years about community and about disaster. Maybe you've listened to what a community member needs when they're recovering from a disaster. Maybe you've mapped out how a region might adapt to climate change and reduce their disaster risk. Maybe you've shared information about the bushfire predictions that are ahead and what might a community do to prepare for the season. Maybe you've thrown around ideas on what needs to change to improve people's experiences through disaster and improve outcomes for everyone. These are the conversations that are happening around kitchen tables, at supermarkets, in community halls, in Zoom meetings, in lecture theatres, in boardrooms around the country. We are all looking around and we're all looking ahead, and we're realising that business as usual is no longer good enough. The assumptions we hold, our definitions of roles and responsibilities, the way we've directed our resources, all of this is being called into question. But no one person and no one group has the knowledge or experience to drive change alone. We need to be able to join conversations up, to learn, to innovate, and to envision a more resilient future together. And this was really the genesis of the idea for this forum. Many of us have been coming together to have these conversations in side groups and small groups. The hosting partners of this forum is Fire to Flourish, Australian Business Volunteers, Mudgee or Monash University Disaster Resilience Initiative, the DisasterWise Communities Network, and the National Indigenous Disaster Resilience Program. We've all felt an urgency to do exactly that, to join up the discussions that we were having with each other, with communities and with the many supporting organisations from public and private and not-for-profit sectors. The common thread to all of our discussions are that community agency and power is critical, and that system transformations are needed. But importantly, community-led doesn't mean community alone, and needing systems change doesn't mean that everything is broken. There is goodwill, capability, innovative practice and strong relationships everywhere we look. So today, we're thrilled to hear from an amazing lineup of speakers who'll be sharing insights from their innovations in community-led resilience across a keynote session and 2 panel discussions. And we've got a wonderful mix of people attending the forum: community groups, local governments, state agencies, social services, community foundations, NGOs, universities, small businesses, large corporates, philanthropic funders, the list goes on. And it's this mix of perspectives and experiences that are really going to create that collective knowledge base and commitment for getting us where we need to go. So we also wanted to provide space for some shared sense-making and cross-fertilisation of ideas in small groups. So the last part of the session will be moving into breakout rooms to continue the discussion as the final part of the forum. Before we continue, I will do a little bit of housekeeping. The session is being recorded and it will be made available for viewing and for sharing after the event. You're welcome to have your video on. It's always nice to see people when we're talking online, but please do keep your microphone on mute. We've got the chat function going, and thank you. I can see the acknowledgements of country streaming in and introductions. Given our large group, we've had more than 300 people register, and people will be in and out during the day. We don't propose that we use the chat function for an interactive discussion. Instead, we'll use it for posing questions that you would like the moderators to bring into the panel discussions. But we do have the breakout group afterwards, where we're really, really keen to hear ideas and reflections. Finally, we'll be taking notes throughout the morning, including in the breakout rooms. We've got facilitators tapped on the shoulder to help support that discussion and the note taking. And what we'd really love to do is to be able to prepare a statement after the event to capture all the key messages that come out from our range of discussions. And this statement we'll share with everyone, and we can all use it as a resource to help advance our collective agenda around supporting and enabling community-led resilience. I will now hand over to one of my co-hosts, Bhiamie, to continue setting the scene.
Thank you very much, Briony. Everybody, it's absolutely lovely to be with you all today, and to be part of this conversation, and to be leading one of the panel sessions that we're shortly going to be listening to. So yeah, my name's Briony Williamson. I'm a Yuwali man. My people come from northwest New South Wales, and that's where I live. So I'm joining from my Ngoorumba, my home camp out here in Garuga, out in the northwest of New South Wales. And just like to acknowledge my mother, who comes from Cloncurry, and her mother, who comes from Normanton, up into the Gulf country up in northwest Queensland. So I'm a senior research fellow at Flourish and lead the National Indigenous Disaster Research Program at Monash University. So in these events, I like to do a bit of scene setting, but today I really feel like the scene's kind of already set, right? I mean, in WA recently, we've seen massive fires smash areas around northeastern Perth, including the damage or destruction of dozens of homes out there. In North Queensland, Cyclone Jasper is expected to make landfall tomorrow. The unusual, not quite unprecedented, but unusual December cyclone. I think it's only the third since the 1970s. Even out here in Garuga, we've just finished a spell of about 8 days where the temperature reached above 40 degrees Celsius. So we've just come through a massive heat wave. 2 weeks ago, there was flash flooding out here with a lot of rain, and it cut off our main access road over to Lightning Ridge, which we rely on for the local IGA and the hospital and so on. And some children go to school over in Lightning Ridge and couldn't get across there for a few days. 2 weeks before the flash flooding, we had a series of fires out here ignited by a large electrical storm that went through, including the Hudson Fire, which impacted one of our real sacred places, the Narran Lakes Nature Reserve, just south of us at Garuga here. Unfortunately, a rural fire service captain, Leo Franson, also lost his life fighting the Hudson Fire down in an area adjacent to Narran Lakes, a place called Glengarry. So, I kind of feel like I don't need to set the scene. I mean, this is the scene. This is climate change. This is multiple cascading disasters that are impacting various parts of the country. So you can see the impacts nationally, but you can also see the impacts really locally. And I'm sure that everyone would have stories of unusual weather and wild weather occurring where they live. But I think the important thing to understand is that these disasters, whilst they're kind of multiple and successive and impacting in different places in different ways, within communities themselves, within the regions, people are experiencing them differently as well. How Indigenous peoples experience disasters is very different to how non-Indigenous peoples and other groups in the country experience disasters. There are socioeconomic factors, there are educational factors, there are other working factors are gender, disability. All of these various facets of our society, of our communities, create unequal experiences. And I think today's a wonderful opportunity to really highlight that, to shine a light on it. We'll talk a lot about community-led and community recovery, but just sort of remembering that community is not homogenous, and it's better to think about communities, being impacted and subgroups within those communities. So that's kind of some of the perspectives which I'm looking to bring, and certainly I hope to draw it out in the panel discussions that we have. But that's a bit of scene setting. I'll pass over to Liz to introduce herself and talk a little bit more.
Awesome. Thanks, Bhiamie. Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Mackinlay. I'm the CEO of Australian Business Volunteers. We've been on the journey of walking with communities this last nearly 4 years around how do you actually enable communities with the support they need to envisage the future they want. One of the reasons that we've brought this forum together, and I won't speak for long because I really want to pass to Senator Tony Sheldon. One of the reasons we have this forum is to actually say it's going to take all of us. It's not about anybody having the lead. It's not about anybody owning a solution. And Briony mentioned that as Briony started this forum. We're all going to need to be part of this conversation. And every person on this call has a contribution to make to the solution. We're talking about system change across government, across the entire ecosystem, across not-for-profits, across all of our first responders who are extraordinary in what they do. But we know that the scale of what is facing us is beyond the capacity of the resourcing that our traditional systems used to have. And so what does it mean for our communities to be in the middle and in the driver's seat of preparedness, response, resilience, recovery? That's what this whole bringing together is. And it is just the first step in multiple conversations we're going to need to have. We are, in one sense, like-minded travellers on the journey. And so let's build that story together. Let's take the wisdom from all of you that are here today and build a conversation that hopefully will bring many, many others into a story of change for Australia around a stronger, resilient future for our communities. And on that note, let me please introduce Senator Tony Sheldon, who is the Special Envoy for Disaster Recovery. Tony's been an amazing fellow traveller in this. So please let me pass to Senator Sheldon.
Good, thanks very much, Liz and Bhiamie and Briony. Look, I think you've summed it up so nicely, and thank you for that wonderful introduction to what's going to be a very important event today. I'm very much looking forward to the outcomes of today. It will be a great deal of assistance to all of us, but also for those of us in government as well. It's part of that leadership of coming together to work out the steps forward. And as part of today on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I'm very pleased to be joining you from here and do speaking to you on the 2023 Community Forum for Climate Resilience. As you may know, the Australian Government Special Envoy for Disaster Recovery is my role, and I work with the Minister for Emergency Management to engage across levels of government and key community groups, and so many of you are here today to make your voices heard in those changes that we're facing now, but also those very positive ways that we can move forward. And during my time in the role, I visited Northern Rivers in New South Wales, up to Wide Bay, Burnett in Queensland, and down to the Riverland in South Australia, and across to Rooraloo in Western Australia. I've seen the trauma created by compounding disasters driven by climate change that many of you have seen and experienced. But when you start looking between January 2019 and January 2023, there's been a total of 188 disaster events. Now, these events have resulted in 1,640 disaster declarations across 434 local government areas, with some of these areas being activated more than once. Now, let's put that in context. That is 80% of all Australian local government areas, or 4 out of 5 councils that have been activated for some sort of assistance under the disaster recovery funding arrangements. Now, these events are putting, of course, a tragic strain on our systems across Australia, and a recovery reconstruction program in excess of $15 billion in all 6 states and territories have been deployed. But it's been tested by cascading, consecutive, and compounding disaster events. Now, that's why the National Emergency Management Agency was established, or NEMA. It's the first of its kind in Australia, an end-to-end enduring national emergency management agency. Now, NEMA plays a national leadership role in supporting the state and territories and our communities to manage disaster and emergency events. Now, since NEMA's establishment, it is focused on what is fundamental to emergency management, supporting Australian communities before, during, and after disasters. Now, through national crisis coordination, federal financial support, and near real-time data and insights, in the first year of action, NEMA has helped the country navigate the relentless cyclones and floods which came to exemplify Australia's 3rd consecutive La Nina. Now, we're setting the foundations for a more stronger and resilient country by investing in the capabilities, data and information, and most importantly, partnerships we need to strengthen emergency management in Australia. And that's, of course, the importance of today. And part of what we've been looking at is delivering the Disaster Ready Fund, which provides up to $1 billion over the next 5 years for natural disaster resilience and risk reduction projects. Continuing partnerships with insurers through the Hazards Insurance Partnership to solve how we can make hazards insurance more accessible and affordable. Establishing Australia's new first national emergency management stockpile. Expanding our geographical information systems technology through the near real-time situation awareness dashboard, launching a public safety mobile broadband task force to drive the more significant uplift in public safety communications, and progressing the independent review into disaster governance and funding and the disaster recovery funding arrangements review. Now, all that's participating in the Australian Government Crisis Management Framework, which is, of course, the important part of how we bring this all together. Now, like all the reforms of this ambition and size, it will take time and challenging, but the results will be absolutely worth it. And part of today is a significant part of that ongoing conversation. Now, NEMA in the country is coordinated and prepared for a well-positioned to respond during the high-risk weather season, but we can't do it and get on. We know we can't get on like this forever. Our communities are fatigued, our ecosystems are damaged, and our economic safety net is stretched. And that's why all Australian emergency management ministers have signed up to the 2nd National Action Plan to implement the National Disaster Risk Reduction Framework. Now, to reduce our disaster risk, we need to start doing things differently. Now, we know we get the best outcomes for communities when recovery and risk reduction is community-led, state-coordinated, and federally facilitated. Now, when we invest in community capacity and response and recovery arrangements that cascade upwards through local, state, and national frameworks, NEMA funds a variety of risk reduction projects that have been designed at the local community and a level to improve disaster and resilience preparedness. Now, these groups provide invaluable contributions, helping communities prepare and respond to emergency, including our volunteers, of course, the important community groups here today, our not-for-profit organisations, and state-based services. Now, volunteers, of course, are a crucial resource for Australia, often responding to immediately and contributing to community-led response and recovery efforts. Now, partners in action across communities, jurisdictions, industries, and continents are also important. Now, all of you here today are all our partners in action, and your stories are examples how we can work together to make our communities safer, stronger, and much more connected. If we can collectively adapt to a changing climate, strengthen our support systems, reduce our risk, we can live differently and build a better future for all Australians. And thank you, Liz. Back to your team, everybody.
Thanks, Senator Sheldon. We really appreciate you being here. And I think it's super important to highlight that there is a lot going on within government. There is a lot going on within government, and the $1 billion over 5 years, the work that NEMA is doing. So thank you for your leadership. Thank you to Senator Murray-Watt, and also to NEMA. I know we've got a few members of NEMA on this call. This, I think, is an important conversation from those community actors to contribute to continuing to get that conversation right. Thank you so much, Tony. Great that you could be with us today. Awesome. Just quickly, as we get on with the rest of the agenda, I think the Senator's brought up a few important points. There is a second National Action Plan. Australia does have a National Disaster Risk Framework. There are initiatives going on at a government level. What we're hoping to do today is amplify community efforts into that conversation. This is an important moment for you who are the practitioners and the people that are living and experiencing disasters at a community level to raise your voice, to bring your experience, to bring those reflections about what works, what isn't working, and how can we potentially together make this a stronger future. So I just wanted to make that point that this is a sense of a collective and a movement of all of us together. This is an opportunity for us to highlight those things that we might need to do differently, highlight the things that are working, and bring together that community voice with the broader sense of those government-led initiatives. So with that, thank you so much to all of you for attending, and I'll pass back to our Master of Ceremonies, Mistress of Ceremonies, our Person of Ceremonies, Briony.
Thanks so much, Liz. Let's get on with the show. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Elly Bird, who is the Executive Director of Resilient Lismore. Many of you will have heard about the outstanding work that Resilient Lismore have been doing since Lismore experienced major floods back in 2017, and then again and again, in the really biggest one in 2022. Elly works at the complex interface between community and government. She has led and mobilised large-scale volunteer efforts across the Lismore region, particularly in disaster settings, and she's also a councillor on Lismore City Council. So Elly is going to spend about 15 minutes now reflecting on the journey of Resilient Lismore, how it's evolved, the work it's doing, and what she and the community have learned through that process. So Elly, I will welcome you now, and if someone can find the spotlight to bring Elly onto the screen for everyone, that would be wonderful.
Thanks so much, Briony. It's all right, it's okay. It's really good to be here. So I'll just set the context. I'm off-site. I'm not in Lismore at the moment. I'm working away at Woodford Folk Festival. So my apologies in advance to all of you if somebody walks through the office door, because we are busy getting things done. And right on cue, the electrician opened the door as I was about to start. So good morning, folks. It's really great to be here. I'm so honoured to be asked to be a part of this conversation. And to kick off, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that I'm with you today on Ginnaburra country in Queensland. It's a place that's really special to me because I've been coming to work on this particular event for, I think I counted yesterday, it's been 25 years that I've come back each year to work at this event. And I will come back to that as part of this conversation because it really is part of the conversation that I want to have with you. I also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of my homeland, the Widjabul people in the heartland of Bundjalung country, and pay deep respects to them, their elders and their leaders. And I never start anything to do with Resilient Lismore and our journey without acknowledging the significant work that the Koori Mail, which is a wholly Aboriginal owned entity in the heart of Lismore, did at the height of the disaster to look after and care for our community. So deep respects to everyone and any Aboriginal people on the call with us today. So I'm going to do my utmost to try and fit the story of Resilient Lismore, the story of our community, into 15 minutes. And there's no way that I'm going to be able to even start to address the depths and the complexity of the recovery journey that we're on, but I'll do my best. So Briony touched on a little bit the genesis and the journey of Resilient Lismore. So we were a 100% volunteer, 100% grassroots community initiative that responded to the major flooding in 2017 in the heart of Lismore. We coordinated spontaneous volunteers, donated goods, we did wellbeing checks for people in the community, we helped people to rebuild. We were open for a sum total of 21 days operating out of the South Lismore train station. We delivered 900 jobs and coordinated 2,000 volunteers. We thought we were amazing, and we were. We did a really phenomenal thing. And then between 2017 and 2022, our community also had some of the bushfire impact from 2019 and 2020. We went through COVID, and so Resilient Lismore existed within that time frame as an online organising resource, as a community connector, and we engaged in each of those activities as they came through. We also took on a real focus on emergency warning amplification on social media. So if the SES put out flood warnings, we would amplify them. Then we come to 2022, and everybody knows what happened in the region during that disaster, but to put it into context, across the region, not just in Lismore, across the Northern Rivers, we had more than 5,000 homes severely damaged. Up to somewhere around 1,700 of those were in about a 2.5 kilometre square radius in the centre of Lismore. That was more than the entire number of homes lost in the 2019-20 bushfires in that small an area compared to the number of homes impacted across the state. So it can't be underestimated or underemphasised the significance of what's happened in our community. Those homes were inundated almost up to their gables in 2-storey homes that were prepared for flooding. So in 2017, I think roughly we had total inundation in homes of, I don't know, maybe 30 homes. And in 2022, more than 1,700 just in Lismore alone. And then we have the downstream communities of Wardell, Woodburn, Corrockeye, Bunga-Walburn, Broadwater. We have homes sliding down hills out in the hills around Nimbin, landslides, people buried in mud, Mullumbimby, Byron Bay, Ballina. So it's huge what's happened in our region. So we stood up again because we had muscle memory from what we had done in 2017. There wasn't really a choice for us to be able to stand up. The community knew that we were a resource in disasters, and as community organisers, the phone calls just started to come, and the need to respond was just abundantly evident. We had thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people pouring into our community to assist. We had hundreds of semi-trailers turning up unannounced at the outskirts of our city, and we had to coordinate and attempt to bring some level of efficiency to the region-wide impact. Now, it's really important for me to acknowledge that we are just one part of a very complex ecosystem of community response. There were community response initiatives that stood up in each of those community locations, and there were efforts to collaborate, coordinate, and to share resources. At the same time, there was the response of local government, the response of state government, and then the response of other external NGOs. So we had an incredibly complex, layered network of people wanting to be efficient, get involved, and to assist. So we've done what we can within that space. The other amazing thing of having the Koori Mail stand up and do what they did on the coalface as a real key focal point in Lismore, it enabled Resilient Lismore to prepare ourselves for the very long tail of recovery. We knew after our 2017 experience that we were looking at probably a minimum of 10-year recovery. And that's evident at the moment, with so many homes still heavily damaged, so many people still living in unacceptable housing, and a really significant level of community infrastructure and rebuild still underway. So we started to get ourselves organised for the long game. And that's kind of where we're at now. We're in the medium term. We're coming up to our second anniversary on the at the end of February in 2024. So 2 years in, where are we? So 2 years in, we have had to live through the perfect storm of politics. No insult at all to our fantastic government friends here, but the experience in the Northern Rivers has been that we started with Resilience New South Wales. It was disbanded. We got the Northern Rivers Reconstruction Corporation. It's now been rolled up into Reconstruction Authority. We had a federal election and then a state election, and all within the space of 18 months, at the same time as trying to navigate an incredibly complex disaster recovery. So that has been another layer that has been really difficult for us, let alone the scale of what government is trying to respond to. So the bureaucracy that communities have had to navigate is significant. The stand-up of adaptation plans that we've just never seen the likes of. The buyback program that is currently underway in the Northern Rivers. In Lismore alone, of 600 buybacks, we're anticipating that 400 of those will be within that small footprint. So the change in our community is substantial. Our community is currently navigating an experience where some homes are being removed, some homes aren't, some people are living there. Some people are remote. Some homes have been bought back and renovated and are now rental properties. And the social fabric of our community in the heartland of that disaster zone is really under pressure. I think that's important to note because we are one of the highest disaster risk communities in Australia. And at any time, another flood could come and another disaster could occur in the Northern Rivers, and we will be in a very, very serious situation should that happen to us anytime within the next 5 to 10 years. But we're here to talk about the impacts of climate change. And so we have to prepare for the fact that something like that will happen to us again. It's just a matter of time. So there's a lot of work underway in the Northern Rivers, so much work, so much incredible effort, so many amazing initiatives, community leaders stepping up and developing plans, doing them in place-based, localised ways. And then at the same time, the Reconstruction Authority really driving hard to implement ways that community can collaborate with government. And our good friends at NEEM are very, very busy as well, covering a large footprint. So huge amounts of work going on. The reason I touch on that is because it's a very busy space, but in the theme that Briony has introduced, a collaboration is a really big focus going forward into the next couple of years. So Resilient Lismore, first and foremost, has always positioned ourselves as a partnership organisation. We can't do any of this alone. It's an all shoulders to the same wheel recovery. We must find ways that we can partner and effectively collaboratively work together if we're going to address the really significant structural issues and changes that our communities are facing. And if we're able to be better organised and better prepared for future events. So that's what's underway at the moment. As we approach the second anniversary, there's a couple of key initiatives happening. There's lots of training of community level initiatives happening across the region. We are looking at a regional summit in the early months of next year where we'll try to bring together as many regional community-based stakeholders as we possibly can so that we can really knit together that civil society that underpins the recovery capitals that are so important for a strong recovery, a strong response, and a strong community. So when Briony introduced me, she mentioned one of the things that I often say, which is that I proudly seat myself at the complex and difficult nexus between community and government, and none of it's easy. They're very different systems and approaches, and I guess it's important to note in that comment that Resilient Lismore is formalising and has formalised and is more structured than we were when we started in 2017. And I really acknowledge anyone at all that's on the call who has come to this space from that grassroots response place. Because as we think about this stuff, it's really important that we don't forget emergent groups, that we don't forget grassroots community actors who don't know that they are the disaster responders of the future, that they don't know that they are the community-based organisers that are going to see their communities through significant disasters. So in all of this planning and thinking that we do, we have to think about how are we going to catch the emergent folks, the people who start to leverage their existing skills to support their communities when they are disrupted by the worst possible experience they may have to navigate. So I want to use that as a little jump to talk about something that is a key philosophy of mine, and it's very anchored in where I am right now. Because I think sometimes we have this big conversation as well, how do we build community resilience? How do we build preparedness in communities? How do we get those skills embedded so that a community will know how to work together and how to support each other at times of disruption? And so we start to talk about fire plans, and we start to talk about evacuation centres, and we talk about making sure that our community facilities have backup power and water reserves, and all of that is really, really critical. What I really want to see us do is to focus on ways that communities can learn to work together. So as well as infrastructure, as well as plans on a bit of paper, let's have experiences where we can learn to do things together. And one good way to do that is by doing outdoor events. Outdoor events are exactly like a disaster, except they're probably better planned. You have to manage infrastructure, you have to manage parking, you have to manage people. Quite often people are distressed. Sometimes you have to manage inclement weather, sometimes you have to manage roads getting washed out, sometimes you have no toilets, sometimes the toilets get backed up, sometimes you don't have enough volunteers, sometimes you have too many volunteers. Sometimes you have hundreds of people need to register all at once through a system that isn't necessarily working, and you have to figure out how to pivot and adapt. So I would really love us to see us doing more community events, more opportunities for communities to practice those skills that allow us to work together and to find solutions and to solve problems and to have fun with each other along the way. I think we have to face the reality that we are stepping into a future where this is just part of who we are and what we do. And it's really important that as we do this work together, that we remember to have fun and we remember to do it in supportive, encouraging, connecting ways so that we're not overburdened by the seriousness of what it is that we're doing. So yeah, on that, I think I'll close, and thank you again so much for the opportunity. And if anybody would like to come up and volunteer at Woodford, there are still many places available for you to do so.
Thanks so much, Elly, and what an amazing note to finish on. And all the evidence shows that social capital is the most important resilience factor for a community. And so I love that vision of investing in the fun and the connections and building the skills and the experience so that groups are ready when disaster does hit. If there are any questions, we've got just a couple of minutes for questions. Please feel free to drop them into the chat box. But one to kick off, you described Resilient Lismore as a partnership organisation and really emphasised that collaboration is key. I wondered if you could expand on what's helped that collaboration? What have been the key enablers that have allowed you to step in and really be that partnership collaborative organisation?
Yeah. So I'll just give a little plug. We've just put our annual report on our website. So if you do want to have a little read about the work that Resilient Lismore has been doing in the last year and a half, please do go and have a little look at what we've been up to. But to list them, we've partnered with Disaster Relief Australia, we've partnered with Reese Foundation, we partnered with and helped Red Cross to deliver some funding. We've partnered locally with the Catholic Diocese, with the Winston Soup Kitchen, Social Futures, Uniting, like the list goes on. There's a huge list of organisations in our back pages of that report, and it's not all of them. So I think the enabler for that partnership approach, so I'll start first, let's talk about external organisations. So the really important enabler for external organisations that want to come and work with us is that we have the local knowledge, we have systems, we know our community, we have the relationships in place. We can provide the backbone of the organising that is required to make sure that our community isn't getting, and we're not preventing it in any means, but we are mitigating that impact of many organisations trying to help the same individual. So we provide a focal point that those organisations can collaborate with. The Disaster Relief Australia theatre commander, I think is the language they use, referred to it as a force multiplier. So the fact that we can work together means that our efforts are stronger together. Same with Reese Foundation, who came in and deployed tradespeople into our community. The fact that we were there ready for them to work alongside meant that the impact that they were able to deliver was significantly greater. And I guess we've just always been open and receptive. If anybody at all wants to think about how they work with us, we just say, yes, let's have a conversation. So yes, let's do it. And then if we get to a point where we go, oh, actually, no, that's not really working, then we can make that decision there. But yeah.
Elly, thank you. What an inspiring story, and you might be able to see the flow of comments coming through. And yeah, what an energizing way to kick us off. I am going to now hand over to Bhiamie, and we'll get going with our panel discussion. And good luck at the festival preparation, Elly.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Over to you, Bhiamie.